evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being a part of BLAW Live today. And it's wonderful to be with you. And as always, BLAW's Bishop Larry Ward Live. And we do these discussions and interviews, and we just talk about relevant issues. And I have folks on to talk about their stories. And I think you'll find it interesting that as we have different guests on, they have some very important things to say regarding how to make ourselves healthy and whole. So today, I'm glad that I can have Christopher Adams with us today, and he's my godson, and so I'm glad that he's able to come and be a part of it. He's going to talk to us about some linking business and what he's doing in the area of mental health today, and so delighted to have him. And we're grateful. So if you're here for the first time, welcome. If you're online right now, share with somebody, let them know that we're here, and they can just get right on. And also use the chat box and let us know what your questions might be, what your comments might be, and so that's very helpful for us as well. All right. So without further ado, hey Chris, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
We're doing okay. We're doing okay in the midst of all that's happening. The challenges of the pandemic still goes on, but we're doing okay. So our audience may not know who you are, and some may actually be watching. They know you from for a long time, but just in case we do have some viewers that don't know anything about you, so tell us about yourself. Where you're from, your educational background, and what do you do for work. So just take some time to just tell us who you are.
So a little bit about me is I actually grew up on Howard Street where Abundant Life is. My family lived there from the time I was born up until I think 2010. They moved to North Carolina, but I myself currently live in Worcester, Mass. That's where I went to college. I graduated from Clark University with a bachelor's in psychology. And what I'm currently doing for work is I'm a community-based mental health worker, or it's kind of behavioral and mental health. What I do is I work with kids in the community, ages anywhere from 4 years old all the way up to 18 years old. I help them essentially build skills around um, things they're lacking in their life that have been affected by traumas that they've been through and just things relating to their mental health diagnosis. And
Wow,
the company that I work for is called Luck Inc. in Worcester, Mass.
wow. So how did you come to a place where you found interest in psychology and just kind of going in that direction of working in the psychology field?
I think initially where my interest began was with my auntie E, who's now passed away actually. Um, I don't know, just the way that she worked with people, the way she talked to people, the way she connected with people. I always found that very intriguing. Um, and just the way that it was effective in people's lives. I always told myself that I wanted to be effective um, in the way that I help people. So I think that's what really drew me into the psychology field is how I can be effective in people's lives and really help them.
Wow. So tell us a little bit about, now that we've been in the pandemic now, we're going into just crossing over a year since we heard about this COVID-19. And, just reading myself on how it has impacted families and impacted people because of isolation and people experiencing loss. What effect is it having on children when it comes to their mental health?
I think the biggest thing with kids is they're so used to routine that when they're not in that routine of waking up, having breakfast, going to school, having that after school activity and engaging with their parents in the same way every day, it kind of throws off their equilibrium. The main thing I'm seeing with kids right now is they're not able to expend energy in the same ways that they were before. And they're also not able to practice their social skills in the way that they were before. Because now that kids aren't able to be in person with one another as much, or I, um, I don't know if kids are really seeing one another because Some parents are very different in regards to COVID. Some parents are more comfortable with kids being around one another and they're wearing masks. Some parents, they don't want their kids around anyone at all. But what I'm seeing for the most part is that disconnect of, um, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. What I'm seeing is the disconnect in community, essentially. Kids not being able to connect with other kids. The computer takes away the ability to engage socially because you can only do so much over the computer. Kids can do the online gaming, they can do the Zooming, but it's not the same as being face to face and getting that physical connection with other kids. And then with the parents as well, because I also engage with parents through my job. I'm not just engaging with the kids. Um, what I'm seeing with the parents, or the relationship between the kids and the parents, is the parents are working from home or having to do more outside of their normal schedule. So they're not able to tend to the kids or engage the kids as much as they were before. And that's affecting the kids tremendously, to the point where some kids and parents are developing depression.
Mm. So as you're looking at all of these types of situations that parents are trying to help their kids are trying to get online. Sometimes the online presence is not good, or they're not able to learn effectively through means of online learning. What what is the mental health profession saying in terms of trying to help to really bring back an equilibrium to that? Because hopefully we're going to be able to get back to some type of social connection. So what are they saying now that you need to get ready for, if anything?
Well, it's great that you pinpointed that, because that's actually one of the biggest issues right now. Um, how do we come away from kids not doing well virtually? The thing is, some kids just aren't going to do well, and that's the reality of this. Because there's kids that were doing tremendously physically in the school, and now they're doing very poorly virtually because they just can't engage the same way. And there's only so much you can do when a kid, especially if they have something like anxiety, where they're having to sit in front of a computer with 20, 30 other kids, however many kids are in the classroom, and try and learn in the same way. It's very different than being there physically, and having a teacher there, having teachers' aides there to help the kids. Um, so I don't know, honestly. That's a great point. I think that's one of the toughest things, because you can't really create a system that works for every single kid. And I think that's the biggest thing about mental health is, um, we try to we try to help kids in one way or try and steer kids in one direction, but there's a bigger picture of mental health that each kid or each person has their own special thing going on, and it needs to be tended to in its own special way.
Well, that's
Sorry if I
insightful.
went off on a tangent
No,
there, but
that's insightful because as we're looking at it, we just reading things, I recognize that certainly one size does not fit all. And so on the solution side of it, as best we can do to manage what we have and make that's really what probably the best thing we can do is manage what we have at this point. What are things that people are doing that you find uh, successful that might be able to help the viewing audience say, we're finding some things that are successful to help our families, our children, when it comes to dealing with either their depression or their disconnect or their anxieties. What are things that you might suggest that are helpful?
um, acknowledging what's really important and figuring out what's really important and really just dialing down on that, because I think during this space, parents are getting very caught up in their kids doing the schoolwork, doing the homework, and they're not realizing that they're also going through a traumatic experience. COVID is a traumatic experience in itself. And I think everyone is trying to just get back into the swing of things. And this is a very not normal experience, you know what I mean? So, uh, sorry, can you ask the question
Yeah,
again?
yeah. Like what solutions that you say? Okay, so you said okay, we're dialing down into the essentials. What might be some of the essentials that you find that families are doing that are working?
Basically just creating systems, whether that be a schedule of, you do your schoolwork during this time, you get to play video games during this time, and then you're doing an activity outside during this time. Um, Mainly giving them outlets and not having very high expectations, because this is not something that kids are used to. This is not something that parents are used to. So you yourself can tell your kids to do X, Y, Z, but what are you also modeling for your kids? That's another thing. Um, a lot of parents are in the space of do as I say and not as I do. And the parent themselves is struggling during this COVID time, whether that be working from home or being laid off from work, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the biggest thing is really creating a system that works for you and not paying so much attention to what the news is saying or what everyone else is doing, because what everyone else is doing is not necessarily going to fit your situation.
Yeah, that's great advice. Just structure and systems and being able to kind of make sure that we're having some type of way of going about our lives the best we can.
Right.
And so, yeah, and that's really insightful. When it comes to your work in mental health, I know that you started a business in called Robohoney. So I got my Robohoney gear on, um, and I see that you got your Robohoney gear on.
I do.
So tell us how your business, your mental health practice, and all the things that you're doing kind of gave you this whole idea about Robohoney.
So I started Robohoney after my younger brother Timothy passed away, and within that whole space of understanding my own trauma and dealing with the trauma of my brother passing away, um, I started to look around and see that I wasn't the only person dealing with this struggle. So yes, there's therapy out there. Yes, there's things out there to help people, but I said to myself, there's not really anything available that's truly effective in helping my peers in a way where people are understanding what's going on with themselves, and not just understanding, acknowledging and taking the steps to grow from whatever you're experiencing. So I had the idea to create Robohoney as a way to help people. Um, Basically, it's a way to help people understand their own trauma and mental health.
Wow. And so Robohoney's a unique name. You're not going to hear Robohoney from just kind of. It's like, okay, what is a Robohoney? What is that? So I get comments when I wear my gear. It's like Robohoney. What is that? Is that a place? Is it what goes on with that? So tell us about why did you call it Robohoney?
So I called it Robohoney because if you look at the logo, it's kind of a split. It's half of a robot and half of a bear. So I wanted to incorporate the name essentially comes from the logo, because weirdly enough, I came up with the logo before I came up with the name Robohoney. Not really sure how, but that's how it came about. But the the half where it's a robot, um, there's a whole explanation for each part of the logo, but I wanted to incorporate the robot side and the bear side within the name of the brand.
So let's see. Maybe you have a logo. My logo just says Robohoney, but I think your logo has actually the way it
Yeah, so
looks.
I actually have the logo here. I don't know if it's gonna show up clear on the screen.
Oh yeah, I could see it. So tell us what we look. Tell us what they're going to look at, and kind of what the symbolism means.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll break it down. I'm trying to get it in the frame so it's clear. But the top of the logo is the B, and the B exemplifies the traumatic experience or person causing trauma. So I don't know if I mentioned this before I get too deep into it. The logo itself is unique to each wearer that wears the Robohoney brand. So I'm explaining this logo, but the logo literally means something different to you. It means something different to me based on the things that we've experienced, based on the trauma that we've experienced. But back into it. So the B exemplifies traumatic experiences or a person causing trauma in our life. The honey that flows down from the bee exemplifies the representation of the issues or struggles induced by the bee or your bee. The robot side of the logo is the representation of unrealistic expectation for us to function perfectly as if our trauma does not exist. And then the bear side of the logo is the internal and external representation of the trauma we've experienced or are experiencing. And the
Well,
reason why the bear looks kind of like sad and depressed and sleepy is because the main struggle that I experienced after my brother passed away was anxiety and depression. And that's pretty much what I looked like for the first year after he passed away. I was very just not with it. Looked very sleepy all the time. I was very depressed, just very down. Um, so I wanted to incorporate that in the logo because I feel like a lot of my peers are struggling with depression. And I, I don't know specifically why I wanted to include that mental health diagnosis in the look of the logo, but I know it has to do with the fact that a lot of my peers are struggling with depression.
well. So do you find out of all of this, and I know that that was a very traumatic experience when Timothy died. I was actually in it with you in a number of ways that it was just shocking. It was, I can't believe this, to like what happened, why did it happen, and sadness. And you know, grief is very, very different for everybody.
Mhm.
And so I thank you for sharing kind of what your experience, all that year, following Timothy's passing. And I'm sure that, we never forget the ones that we were with that are no longer here, whether it's I lost parents, I've lost uncles, I've lost nephews, and it's um it's just certainly traumatizing to lose someone, that you love. Especially Timothy was so vibrant. He was just starting out. Seemed like he was just
Mhm.
starting out on his path. Um, so how are you doing? How are you doing now? How are you doing now? As a, on one end you're helping people, but also you're in a stage where, okay, I'm dealing with whatever I'm dealing with. How does that work in terms of how you're feeling?
I think I'm in a great space, but I can't say that I'm completely healed per se, because I think I realized over time that the mental health journey really is a journey, and things like depression kind of come back in waves. Because there's times where I'm on it, I'm upbeat, I'm doing everything I need to do with work. Robohoney's booming, and then there's times where I don't feel like doing anything at all. I feel like just laying down. Um, and it's interesting because that's when the most people are reaching out to me, asking me how I'm doing. And so it's like people can feel it in their spirits when I'm not doing well. But um, it's something that is really a journey, and it takes a lot of intentional work. And I think that a misconception of mental health is things get better over time. And I think that's one of the most false things about the mental health journey is that things get better over time. Things get better with intentional effort. I'm gonna say that again. Things get better with intentional effort. So you don't get better by just waiting for time to pass. You have to think about, what am I going through, or what did I go through? How did this affect my life? How did this change my life? And what do I need to do? What are the steps I need to take to make this better? Um, and that's really what I did within that first year after my brother passed away, is trying to understand, what did I just experience, and what do I need to do moving forward? And once I kind of acknowledged those things and I was able to do it for myself, I was like, I really want to help other people do this within themselves.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Um, so the question, when should people reach out? So, you mentioned that you have peers that, have had trauma in their lives and they're depressed and things have happened and they may not know what to do. When should they say, okay, I need to get some help with this? I have some anxiety, I have some depression, I have some things that are going on, things have happened. When did that trigger say, I got to get somebody to help me with this?
When things start to get dangerous, or I don't even think you should wait that long. Just when you feel like things are not normal and you can't pull yourself out of it, if you feel like you're physically literally stuck in the hole, if you feel like the world is against you, the list goes on. It's really just, if you don't feel like yourself, that's when you know you need help.
Mm, that's good.
And
Now,
whatever yourself is, only you know what that feels like. So
right.
people can look at you and feel like you need help, but only you can tell yourself that you need help, and be ready for that help. Because someone, and that's the flip side of therapy. A lot of kids are put in therapy and they're not willing or ready to engage in it, so it's not effective because they're not taking the steps that they need to on their end to grow within the therapy space.
Mm. Yeah, and so when it comes to children, that's certainly we have to be observant as parents and guardians, and particularly men. We don't usually do well at talking about issues of anxiety, depression, um, areas that we really have struggling with our health. Um, we're kind of very quiet on these types of issues. So, what might make men, and there are probably some men listening to us tonight and today, and we're actually um, listening to your story. And what about the women who are here as well and say, this would be great for my significant other to hear as relates to how men deal with that. Why is it that men kind of go through this thing where they almost have to really go down to almost zero to be able to say, hey, I need some help?
Because I think society has built us up as men to not feel ourselves, and that if you do feel, you're less of a man. And I realize it's actually the opposite. I feel like more of a man the more I address my feelings, and the more I'm able to understand my feelings. And this became more prominent within my relationship, because I realized I needed help when it started spilling into my relationship with my girlfriend, because she was telling me I was being very aggressive and I didn't realize it, because I was telling her this is part of who I am. But it really wasn't. It was part of the trauma, and what I was, um, or how the trauma was coming out of me. It was coming out in aggressiveness. So I realized I had to acknowledge that aggressiveness and say, this is not me. This is not who I am. This is not part of me. Um, in order to grow from it. And I think what happens with a lot of men is they say, this is who I am. And it sticks with them, for years and years and years. And it works against them in the grand scheme of things. And your trauma is not a part of you, it's part of your experience. And that's something that we have to remind ourselves when we go through things. to prevent ourselves from building that hard exterior as men, or maybe
Absolutely.
not even just as men, but as people. I think
Hmm.
we try to avoid our feelings because it reminds us of what we went through, but we kind of have to go through the bad to get to the good.
Wow. And so, do you think that one question came up was, what about how do we battle against that stigma? Because when you talk about mental health and African American men, specifically African American men and men in general, uh, we kind of think of it as it's a stigma that you really need support or find solutions as it relate to your mental health, or reaching out to somebody to deal with anything that would even portray as, well, what would they think of me if I have to go to a therapist, or talk to a psychiatrist, or talk to a psychologist, or talk to my pastor, or go to someone that can help me kind of work out my stuff. How do we deal with that stigma?
I think the way that we deal with that is starting from the ground up, starting within our families, starting within our relationships, starting within our peers, our colleagues, because those smaller conversations end up growing to the bigger ones. And I myself, I thought I could save the world, but I realized I have to really do what I can. And that's tending to the people that are in front of me. And a lot of the time, there's people in front of us that are showing certain things that, we can really help, but we're not doing it because we feel like these people should know that they need to do it already, or, you know what I mean? Um, I don't know. That's a tough question. That's a really tough question.
Yeah, it's not an easy 1, 2, 3 answer, but it is one of those things that I find that prevents men from getting the type of help they need, is to override that stigma that if I go to a therapist, it must mean that, what am I just not, I'm just kind of like not myself, or am I admitting to losing something, or is my masculinity going to be in question because I see someone to help me with my um, a problem that I'm having, or my depression, and so yeah, it's not a easy answer to come into, but it's a battle. It is a battle because ego, as you know, is a major part of being a man,
Absolutely.
masculine. Yeah. So by the time we end up going to a doctor, or somebody who's can help us with our emotions or issues or things that we sometimes are ashamed of, it's really gone to a point where we have, we kind of either gone underground, we're isolated, or we're actually taking substances that are really helping us to take the edge off of what we're feeling.
But I don't think that that is by coincidence, or it's unintentional. I think that that's almost by design, in the same sense of the whole prison system, and how there's so many minorities in the prison system. I think that almost goes hand in hand, where there's an agenda to take us away from becoming the best versions of ourselves. Because
Mm.
if we do become the best versions of ourselves, then we might become superior as a people. Um, and I think that's what's happening in the grand scheme of things. There's different things within society that's pulling us. It's picking us apart and pulling us away from our true selves. And tending to your mental health will help you realize that, and help you kind of add things and develop skills that um, allow you to interact with the world in a way that doesn't. Um, sorry, I'm losing my train of
Yeah,
thought.
I hear what you're saying.
It's
I
a,
hear, I
it,
hear what you're saying.
I'm having a tough time responding to this one because I know what I want to say, but it's a lot.
Yeah,
It's a lot because I don't know if I should say certain things. You know what I mean? But
well, you
um,
can say it. We're having a conversation.
I don't think that it's a coincidence that so many people see that therapy isn't necessary. They don't even think about it. It's not a coincidence.
Well, yeah, that's a very interesting perspective on that as well. Because growing up, and I'm kind of grew up in the '60s. I'm a boomer, and didn't talk much about therapist, and didn't talk much about psychologist or psychiatrist. Didn't talk much about that. Um, and it wasn't really just talked about very much, in terms of, oh yeah, there are people that can really help you in certain areas of trauma. And when I went through trauma, I went and did a trauma training as a pastor and kind of worked with people who actually had to endure some really difficult situations, and dealing with some folks who came through um, the real trauma of the New Orleans. And when the Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, they were bringing people here. So a group of pastors and I and with us kind of went out to Otis Air Force Base and met those families out there, and the
Mm.
unbelievable trauma that was happening with people, where they were getting off a plane and they didn't even know where they were. They had to ask, well, where are we? We were just told to get on a plane and get out, but they never were told where they were going. And they ended up in Boston. They ended up on an Air Force base out on the Cape. And just if just the trauma of going from the warmth of New Orleans into the very cold weather of Boston was traumatic enough for them. And how to get back to their families and what happened to their homes, and some of their their spouses were separated and their parents were separated, and it was traumatic dealing and talking with them. So yeah, uh, there's a lot to learn, and I think there's a lot to really understand that these types of professions are needed, and more men need to go into these type of professions to help other men as well. So not that women can't help us, but men, I think I commend you for being a young African American male to go into this profession to really help children and help families really deal with their trauma, their anxieties, and their mental health. So I just have another question for you. Um, how does your faith, because we're faith guys. I have faith, and I'm a pastor, and I'm trying to teach people that there's a God that cares for you, there's a God that loves you, there's a God that really wants you to know that we do have trials and our tribulations, our situations, that there's hope in Christ. And so how does faith, if at all, relate to what you do for work, help you in your work, help you with managing all the stresses that you have? Does it have any helpful things that it might add to you?
I think that my faith is what reminds me every day that I'm doing this for a reason. Um, and each client that I engage with, there's a special relationship that I have with each client. And when I meet these clients, there's always a special connection that I have. Um, and for some reason, I always attribute that to God. Um, Even the animals within the home, it's weird. It's like people can feel my energy when I go in their home. And I feel like it's because I have such a strong spirit. Um, and that spirit is a Christian spirit. But how do I carry my faith through my work and what I do? I'm often in some dangerous predicaments. Like I had I had a young kid who this was a contracted case through DCF. I actually took him to Dick's Sporting Goods, and he stole a pocket knife or something like that, and he's in the back seat. And this kid is a very dangerous young man. Has a lot going on with him right now. I won't get into it just for legal reasons, but um, it was a safety issue for me. But everyone in my company was commending me for how I handled it and just everything that happened after the fact. And I'm looking at people, I'm like, it wasn't that big of a deal. But I had to realize that it was a big deal. It just wasn't a big deal to me because my faith is so strong that I'm not worried about anything that happens to me. I'm not worried about what's going to happen tomorrow or the day after or anything that's happened in the past. I, I have full faith in what I do because of the faith that I have. Um, and I have full faith in my safety and what I do because of the faith that I have. So I think that's how it translates to the work that I do, because at times it is very dangerous. And at times I think I do lose hope when I'm working with kids, for example, that are on the autism spectrum. It gets very tiresome, and just the grand scheme of things or the bigger picture almost gets lost because um, special cases like kids on the autism spectrum take very, very special care. So it's very easy to get lost in translation or to feel hopeless when you have cases like that. But my faith certainly has helped in those areas.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So I commend again what you're doing, and it's good. It's good work to really help
I actually,
people.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I want to go back and answer what you said about how do we take away the stigma of, I can't remember exactly how you worded it, but the stigma of Black people going to therapy. I actually realized this the other day, how important it is for me to go back to school and get my master's degree, because the way we take away that stigma is by more Black men becoming therapists. So I am working in the therapy field, but I'm not a licensed clinician yet, which is the ultimate goal of Robohoney. I don't want to get too much into it because I really want to show people. I don't like to talk about it too much. I'm really someone that likes to get on the ground moving and show people what I can do. But I think the real way to take away the stigma is by more Black men working in the field and becoming therapists. So that's what I'm currently working to do, going back to school, getting my master's degree so that I can do that and then eventually open my private practice and connect Robohoney with it.
That's cool. That's cool. So we're going to end with this, and thank you so much for being a part of BLAW Live and sharing your story. And if people want this gear that you have, can they get some gear?
Yes, so I have a website. It's robohoney.com. And actually, one thing that you said, um, you mentioned something around commemorating a loved one. Or I think you said something that made that pop in my head. If you have an interest in commemorating a loved one that passed away, or maybe even a pet, I've done pets before. We do customs where you can put a picture of the loved one, or we can create a custom around something to commemorate that loved one. If you want to send me an email or reach out to us on Instagram, either way works. But yeah, the website is robohoney.com to make purchases. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you all tonight for being a part of BLAW Live. As we have Chris Adams here with us tonight, and to just really talk about this really important work that he's doing in the area of mental health and helping families, and also the business of Robohoney. So I want you to support that business, and I want you to commemorate those who you love and get some gear. And that's also supporting him as he goes further and becomes a clinician. And so we're looking forward for that being a reality as well. So thank you all for joining us. And until next week, we want to say, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord cause his face to shine upon you May the Lord be gracious unto you and give you his shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken. Until we meet again, God bless. Have a good evening. Bye bye.